Hey guys, I am so excited to introduce you to Rebecca Hubbard. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist, but she has decades of experience working with children in trauma. She gives us practical tools for when this work gets tough, when we're triggered in sessions, when our own stuff's coming up, when we're just frustrated. Whether you're a program director or a mentor or a foster parent or just a parent, there's something for everyone in this episode. She currently works at Pecan Creek as their clinical director, but she also does equine assisted psychotherapy. So she's totally aligned with this podcast and this audience. I also want to let you guys know that the Stable Moments podcast now has a Facebook group. So just go on Facebook and search Stable Moments podcast and you can join the conversation there. All right, guys, here's Rebecca Hubbard. Let's do this. Hi, I'm Rebecca Britt, and this is the Stable Moments Podcast, the show where we discuss all things related to the foster care system and early childhood trauma, from foster parents, trauma experts, former foster kids, and beyond. We'll take a deep dive into the complexities of the foster care crisis in an effort to better understand how to fix it. So, I know you and I had emailed back and forth, and I was trying to think what my community could really use the most of. And I think, I'm always trying to speak to parents, and I'm trying to speak to program directors, and I'm trying to speak to mentors, because we have, and just community members in general, because we have all of those as listeners and as people that work with these children. And I know I shared with you that this is non-clinical work. So none of us in the Stable Moments program are supposed to be doing therapy and may not have any, human services or social work background. And same with parents, right? So, this work can be tough. And I think that one thing that is intimidating for people is when challenges come up. And I personally like to tell people that the challenge is the work, the problems, this makes me feel uncomfortable, the awkwardness, this isn't going right. Now we're getting into it, right? Now this is the work. This is the time that we can show examples and that we can step in and be a support. So can you walk us through, let's just say a program director or a mentor has a child that is being triggered, that they can kind of tell by, we do teach attunement, so they can kind of tell by body language that this kid is getting dysregulated or anxious, and the mentor might be saying, shoot, I kind of want to ignore this and just keep going, but something's telling me that this is supposed to be the work. What do I do here? Can you walk us through that?
Okay. Yeah, I'd be glad to. Can I ask a favor? Can you turn on your video so I can see you? I will do a much better job and not look so goofy if I can see you.
Well, I meant to be recording the whole time. There we go.
All right. So that's an excellent question. So one of the things that I think about is when a kid is getting triggered, even if I'm not in a therapeutic role, right? Let's say I'm in a support role for a kid. That tells me where they are in their body and in their brain. And I need to be talking to the part of the brain that they're in, right? So if I'm talking to the cognitive piece of the brain, the thinking part, and they're having a triggering moment that is getting the survival part of their brain engaged, and I'm trying to rationalize with them, then we're just going to be missing each other, right? So one of the things I try to think about is, okay, I might want to ignore it because it makes me feel uncomfortable to say something. But if I ignore it, then the kid's just going to go further into the survival part of their brain. And so one of the things I like to do with kids is get them moving. Okay. When I notice that we have something happening like that, I want to get them moving. Sometimes I just toss a ball back and forth. Sometimes we're walking side by side, right? And we won't say a word. I'm going to use my body, my heart rate, my walking to help regulate that kid. And after I can see that their body is starting to calm down, now then I'm going to go and try to talk about whatever it was that I was trying to address before that they got into that part of their brain. I always let kids know what I noticed once they're calm, because kids need to know it too. They
Mm.
need to understand what their body is doing and maybe understand why it did it and what they can do to help themselves. Because that's a really powerless feeling when you feel like you're hijacked by different parts of your brain and you might not want to do the things that your brain and body are doing, and yet you feel like you're powerless to stop it. So that's what one of the best things to do is get kids moving. That is the best thing that you can do, because it gives them a sense of power, control, direction. You're doing something together, and it's regulating at the same time.
I love that. So, so then you get the kid moving and you're feeling like this was good and this is a regulation activity and the kid's kind of coming around. So, is the language just I noticed something was hard for you? Is it I noticed that do you tell them that you noticed the exact behavior? I noticed you started
I
kind
usually do.
of okay.
Yeah. I usually say, I noticed that when we were talking about this, your body tensed up,
Mm,
jaw muscles tensed up, you held your breath. And I knew that your body was telling me this was really hard. Okay.
I love
And
that. Your
so,
body was telling me that this was really hard for you.
yes, yes. So the kid can feel understood, right? Because the kid might say, but I wasn't upset.
Mm-hmm.
And, you can be in two different parts of your brain at the same time. Your body can be going crazy, and you're like, I have no idea what's going on. I'm not upset. I don't know why my heart's beating so fast. But most kids aren't even connected to their body, so they don't even know that their heart is beating fast, or that they're holding their breath, or that their muscles are all like this. They can't tell,
Yeah, and they
right?
might think that it was wrong, that they're being
Yeah.
pointed out. Like I noticed, you tensed up, and then they're like, "Oh shoot, is this mentor gonna like me? Oh shoot, did I do something wrong?"
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah.
And so it's a really important to help kids understand why we talk about our body responses. Because I will even talk about mine.
Mm-hmm.
I will say, if I'm talking with a kid and the kid says something and I notice that my stomach clenched up, as we're talking about this, I will say, when it's appropriate, I'll say, I noticed when you said whatever, that my tummy really got tight. And I have to listen to that. I'm like, what is it that my tummy is tight about? So I'm modeling for them that I'm going to listen to my body, right? Because my body is giving me a lot of information. One of the things that I think we don't do very well as humans is listen to this vessel that we live in. It's an instrument, and it's an amazing instrument for attunement, for regulation, for helping someone feel heard, for understanding something on a deeper level. Horses have really
Right.
helped me a lot with that, right? Because they listen at such a different level. And so really being able to pick up on their subtle cues and then start to notice mine and my own body when that's happening with horses has really helped me be able to get better at listening. But I think that's one of the best things we can do as mentors, as therapists, as foster parents, as parents, is to be able to be attuned to our body and listen more to it, because it has a wealth of information and knowledge and wisdom.
Yeah, that pausing and listening, and horses give us such good feedback that we can usually get some type of feedback from the horse so that we can do this exercise even when we're brushing or we're walking, or if leaves rustle and we go, oh, like what's the horse telling us? We can do that same thing with our bodies and kind of get this
Yeah.
dialogue going with the
Mm-hmm.
horse so that it's just
Mm-hmm.
normal to talk about our reactions and what our body's telling us, what the horse is telling us.
Right. Yeah. And if I think a kid's brain, you had said earlier, the kid might think the mentor doesn't like them if they, notice this about them. If I feel that that's what a kid is saying, I might just name it. I might say, I noticed that when I was talking about what your body did, that it looked like your brain was saying some really mean things to you. Is that
Mm.
possible that that was happening? And then I don't name it yet. I wait. And the kid might say, yeah. And a lot of times they get really suspicious, like, how did you know? Can you read my mind? You know? And one of the things I always let them know is that um, when we have lots of people have mean thoughts in their brain, you know, that sometimes I have mean thoughts in my brain. Well, you should have done it this way. Well, that was stupid. Why did you do it like that? That person doesn't like you. So, helping them understand that's part of the normal human experience, that we're all going through. And when we can say it, then somebody can help us with it, if that makes sense.
It totally makes sense. So, talk to me about when your completely normal human experience interacts with somebody else's completely normal human experience, and we have a mentor that gets frustrated, or a program director that is pissed off. Maybe they're pissed off at the mentor. Maybe they're pissed off at the kid. I don't know. But maybe there's like this. Maybe they're triggered. Like a kid just said a story about their dad, and now the parent the mentor's having things come up about their dad, and they're like, "Ooh, this is deep. Like I wasn't ready. This was supposed to be about you." So how do we be kind to ourselves while we remain present for the child and quickly kind of redirect ourselves out of, I'm kind of getting agitated with this situation?
Mm-hmm. That's an excellent question. It happens all the time because we're all human, right? And we have our own experiences that are wired into our bodies. And so when that happens for me, because it has in my career, one of the things I've learned is to notice it instead of trying to push it down and ignore it. Because when I push it down and ignore it, it gets bigger, right? So when I notice it, I say, oh, that's reminding me of this. Then I can notice it and I can say, I'm going to talk to someone about that after this. In other words, I've given myself a little box, a little frame that says, this is important. I'm not going to talk about it right now. If a kid notices me, like maybe my eyes welled up with tears, or maybe I looked really angry, then I'm not going to say to the kid, oh, I wasn't feeling sad, or no, I wasn't feeling angry, because then I'm just making the kid feel crazy, right? Because they saw what they saw. So I usually will say, my body was having a lot of feelings about what you said. I don't have to say to them,
Right.
oh, I was remembering blah, 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 right? It's usually enough to say that I was having some feelings about that. Wow, that really hit me in my heart, you know? And often when we admit it, then kids feel more connected to us, even if we were angry, you know? Because we can be angry and be a safe person. I can be really frustrated that I've asked you to sit down for the 1,000th time and you're spinning around the office, and everything's flying everywhere. I can be upset about that and still be a safe person. And that's what people have to learn, I remember one time I had a little guy in my office. He was about 7, maybe 8 years old. And he took it. This was back when I didn't use a laptop. It was a desktop. And he took the monitor and he had it over his head like this. And he was threatening to throw it to the ground. And I remember having this moment like, do I try to protect the monitor? And I was like, but I'm not here for the monitor. If the monitor breaks, it breaks. I'm here for this kid. And he was having enormous, scary emotions for himself. He was terrified. And he was doing everything he could to try to get me to react in the way that he expected adults to react. Right? And I didn't. And the monitor didn't get busted. Now, I think that might be a very lucky thing that the monitor didn't get busted. But I decided that the monitor wasn't the most important thing, that he was. And when you make that shift, kids can feel it. They can really feel it. They know where you're connecting. Is it the stuff or is it me? You know, I remember him right before he graduated. He sat down next to me and he said, "Do you remember the time that I was going to break your computer?" And I was like, "I do remember the time you were going to break my computer." He said, "I knew you loved me then." And I
Aw.
was like, kind of speechless. I was like, how did you know that? And he said, "Because you didn't really care what happened to your computer. You were only caring about me."
Wow.
My words didn't say that. It was my body and it was my energy and it was everything I was paying attention to was about him and not about what got broken or didn't get broken.
Wow. And
And
he
it hits in
translated
a
that.
very, yes, that's how he translated that. Yeah.
That's incredible.
And so it's going to happen. We're going to get triggered. We're going to have a lot of big emotions. When we work with people, it's going to happen. And so it's just really important for you to recognize it, to validate it for yourself. It's okay that came up for me. It's okay that I'm having these feelings. And I can talk about that later. If you are so triggered that you can't like put it to the side, then it would be at that time that you'd be able to say something to the kid like, "I'm going to have to cut our meeting short today," and then go and talk to somebody about it.
Mm-hmm.
But the worst thing to do is to pretend like it didn't happen, because it will happen again.
Yeah, and I think that there's a balance. I had a situation with a mentor that had gotten triggered. Something about her dad, was coming up, and she went ahead and labeled it, said, "I'm having some feelings about my dad." And then went and told her all about her situation with her dad and was, kind of crying and had to really intervene and say like, "Oh, we're not doing this here." So there is a validation of feelings and exemplifying that, yes, I as a human am having feelings now, and we have feelings, right? And things can make us want to cry, and that's okay. And then trying to either bookmark it or, like you said, which I loved, was if you're at a point where you're like, "Holy smokes, this is hitting me and I can't even be present," then at least mentors in our program have the option of tagging out with like the program director and saying like, "Hey, I need to take 5 minutes." And even telling a kid I had to take 5 minutes is okay. The inappropriateness comes in self-disclosing these things
Right.
with, let me tell you, a child that may have never had a dad, so probably doesn't care, it really seems inappropriate to bring up, a squabble that you had with your dad.
Right.
So yeah, I think that labeling it and validating it doesn't mean, which is so important for our non-clinical people, doesn't mean going into it. Doesn't mean going
Right.
into the
That's
depths
right.
of it.
Right. Because then what happens if you go into your stuff, you've lost your focus on the kid. And you're there for the kid. The kid's not there for you. You're there for them. And there are other adults, hopefully, in your life who are there for you, that you can share that stuff with. That's more appropriate. But for the kid, if it stops being focused on the kid, as a mentor, I'd say we have a problem, because that's the whole reason you're there, is to help
Right.
this kid.
Right. And you are, and that is the rule of self-disclosure. Is it of benefit? And by validating and showing a kid, I'm having feelings, it is about them. It benefits them by showing that you have feelings and that they're not alone in when they have feelings.
Right.
And just
Right.
not going further, and even not only going further with your story, but you don't have to feel like, if you're a support person, that you need to dig into their story. You can be there and say, "This, I can see, like, it's okay to be angry, or it's okay to get frustrated," without saying, "What was it?" Or, "You remember your mom?" Or, we're not therapists. We're not trying to dig in. You can be a support person and hold that space for empathy by just saying that you notice, using some of this language that Rebecca has shared with us, without trying to go further.
Right. Right. Because really, the power is in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
The power is in what you're providing the kid in this very moment, that you're listening to them with your whole heart, your whole body, that you're completely present. That is what changes the kid's life. It's not about discussing hard things. It's about you being there when they're having difficult emotions or that things are going on in their lives, right? Because what they believe usually is that nobody likes me when I feel this way,
Mm-hmm.
or when I have feelings. So I have to pretend not to have them.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that's not very healthy, right? So that's the best thing a person can do, is just be there with your whole self.
I love that. Well, so this work can easily kind of be a mirror and help you identify your work. So I know, we're saying, oh, if you feel triggered, that's completely normal. And you might want to look at that at a later time. Say, oh, I noticed my body felt this way. And I have gone as far, I remember as an early case manager, there was a parent or two that I would go to my supervisor and I just don't like her. Literally was my feelings. I just don't like her. And of course, my supervisors were like, okay, well, it's not about, we're not in the business of liking people. We're in the business of helping people. But our bodies quickly, or our minds quickly justify as like, I'm just going to wrap that person up as somebody I don't like and put them over there and hope that I don't need to go any deeper into what is really coming up for me, because there's a reason. Right. This is just a mom with a kid. There's no fault of hers. So this is just a kid in our program, or these are just parents in our program. And I think it's natural for us to get to this point of just, if they would just go away, if they would just change, this program would be great. So what is that really telling us about us, and how can we dive into that work?
Okay. That's a great question. I think that when that happens, when there's somebody we don't like, for whatever reason, I think it's great to go to therapy and to figure that out, right? Because that's you. It's about you. It's not about that person, right? But in the moment, you can't go to therapy. I mean, you can't, say, okay, see ya, I'm going to therapy now. You have to do whatever your job is in that moment. So it hit me very early on in my career. I had a mom who terrified me. It wasn't that I didn't like her. I was scared to death of her. I dreaded going to her home and to see her. And I don't even remember who told me, but somebody said, find something you like about her. And I was thinking, that is impossible. This is what I was thinking. Impossible. But I sat and thought, and I did find not only one thing, but several things I really liked about her being a parent, about how she took care of her kid, how she listened so well, and lots of different things. In the moment that I identified those, the feelings I had, they were still there, but they were not driving the bus, so to speak. They were not taking me places I didn't necessarily want to go. And I felt like I had much more ability to interact with her in a better way. Here's the thing. People know when you don't like them for whatever reason. They know. They can feel it. They might not be able to articulate it, but they know. And their bodies tense up too. And so it behooves us, if we're going to do this work, to be able to soften our bodies, to find things we like about this person. Because usually when you find one thing and you start to soften about them, then you find more and more and more. If whatever it was that was bothering you about that person is smaller piece of that, and then you can work on that on your own time, that's when you should work on it, not with the client, and work on, let these other pieces be in the forefront for you, because your clients will know, right? People used to say to me all the time, why don't you have a high no-show rate? Your clients come. They might be 45 minutes late, but they come. Why? And I said, because I don't care how long, how much they're late, I'm still going to welcome them. I'm going to say, I'm so glad you're here. I'm so sorry we only have 15 minutes, but let's connect and let's talk for a few minutes. I don't just say, hey, you're late. I don't have time. We need to reschedule. Because I wouldn't like that as a person. If I struggled to get wherever I was, then I would feel ashamed if somebody, you know, kind of told me, nope, you're late. I can't see you. Now, I won't see them past their appointment time
Right.
because that's not fair to my next client,
Right.
you know, but I do want them to know that I understand that it was hard. It was hard to get there, you
Mm.
know. I had a kid show up one time for a 7 o'clock appointment. She was 11, I think, and she showed up by herself at 7:45, and I was like, "Where's your mom?" She said, "Well, my mom got stuck at work, so I took the bus to come and see you." Now that was a kid I usually left at 8. I stayed and did a session with her because she took an enormous amount of effort to do that, and that meant it meant something to her, right?
Hmm.
And so I wasn't going to say, "Well, we only have 15 minutes." I didn't have another client, so I was able to give her extra time, you know. But when people buy in, you have to let them know that you notice how hard they're trying because people usually are doing the best they can.
Absolutely. I have a question off that. So we had I've had parents before, of course, you're going to have parents that come late. These are like, sometimes they're bringing 7 kids in a passenger van up
Yeah.
to the barn. So you're going to have
Yeah.
late people. But I had a mom once that would have her kids apologize every time and then say why they made them late. And it was really a very like beautiful intention from the mom, because she was trying to tell us like, I value this service, I value that you guys are here waiting, and I'm going to teach my kids that like it's not okay. But I felt
Mhm.
like it started moving into this, like every time we were starting sessions on reporting something negative, um,
Mhm.
and I just didn't like the tone of, we have to start with an apology and then we can go in. So what would you do for program directors that are listening? What would you recommend to say to the parents, or to kind of shift how we're entering sessions when we're late?
First off, that's a very good thing to notice what was happening, you know, in your body around that, right? Because as you said, it was well intentioned, but it felt like it was going somewhere else. Usually, I want to talk to the parent about that, you know, and so if I can, I would want to talk to the parent by themselves. I don't want to talk about this in front of 7 kids. You know, that's not okay because I want the parent to be able to listen and to be able to tell me whatever that is that they need to tell me. And so I just would say what you just said. Gosh, you know, I've noticed that you're wanting very much to teach Johnny about responsibility and being on time and that how it impacts our relationship when he's late. And I appreciate that effort. And I'm also, though, noticing that Johnny is feeling a lot of shame around this.
Mm.
You know, there's a difference between shame and guilt, right? Guilt is I did something wrong, I need to make amends for. Shame is I'm a bad person.
Mm.
And we don't want Johnny to feel like a bad person, right? And so I would problem solve with her, like, how could we do this differently? You know, this is what you're wanting to teach him, but you're not wanting to teach him this other thing. So how could we problem solve that a little bit differently? And that's the way I would try to handle that. And if mom's okay with it, I would bring Johnny into the conversation around that point and say, hey, you know, I've noticed that you're working on being on time. Let's talk about how are we going to handle that when you're on time, when you're late? What are we going to do? So we have a ritual around it. I think that would help mom, that would help Johnny, and that definitely help us as a program, right? That we all know how we're going to handle it. That's what I would
Absolutely.
try to do.
I love that so much. And I love, like, as soon as you start to feel these things, other people are feeling these things too. And they don't have the answers
Right.
either. And so they're looking for, how can we work this out? So that, I mean, mom probably felt guilt. The kid felt shame, and we
Sure.
were there going, like, we can manage this better. And I think it's so important to have these conversations as soon as we notice them. And I'll just say, like, in this situation, this actually happened. The same family, same kid started running away when it was time to come to the farm. And it ended up being not that he didn't want to come to the farm, he didn't want to report. He knew he was going to be late again, so he would rather just not go. You know what I mean? He didn't want to report that he made us late. So it really spiraled kind of out of control. So not only, noticing these things, but bringing them up and just having a really transparent conversation with mom. And I think it really, it's connected to what you just said about when you're starting to feel like feelings of, I don't like this person, or I don't like this kid, which are valid feelings, I think, for foster parents, for program directors, for mentors. When you think about things you do like about the kid, I use the same kind of thing when I used to do home visits, and I would notice parents, the first thing they would do is report all the bad behavior that happened that month or that week. They would say, I'm glad you're here. She's been, stealing. And so I would say, I want to start my time when I enter the house. I want to start with 3 things that we did awesome this month. Of course, we'll end up talking through some of your challenge points. And that was me as a case manager, not necessarily what people in this program will be doing, but starting off with, I remember at one of those times when that kid jumped out and he said his mom was saying that he was late. I had asked him, what's something that you're super proud of this week? And tried to reframe it right in that moment, because I could see the shame cloud was coming over, and here I am waiting for an apology I felt completely uncomfortable taking. And so I tried to shift that in that moment. Now, I will say, asking a kid what they're proud of that week can also be shame inducing, because if they feel like they're worthless and they don't do anything right, then now they can't come up with something they're proud of. You might have just compounded this shame feeling. But I do like this idea of reporting positive things off the get-go and thinking of things you like about a kid. Would you suggest, or if you're a program director or a case manager or somebody like that, thinking of something you like about this parent, would you suggest verbalizing those things?
You just said a whole bunch of things you could verbalize, so I'm not really sure, but yes, I think that it's important to be transparent with a parent, right? I mean, if I'm feeling uncomfortable about what's happening and I'm worried about my relationship with Johnny and mom, and then I'm going to want to have a conversation about that. I do think it helps to have rituals. I have rituals that I start my time with kids with the same way, and I end them the same way. I think that's okay. And that helps parents to know, yes, we're going to talk about these things, and we're also going to get to my concerns, and I also try to help parents know how to report their concerns. Okay. Because those are the growing edge things. That's the way I discuss them. Those are the things we're learning, right? If I'm struggling with whatever it is, that's your growing edge. This is what we're working on. Okay. And I just tell kids, it's important for me to know where you did well this week and where you struggled, so that I know how best to keep helping you, right? What do we need to work on to help that go better for you? Instead of it being you're a bad kid, all these things, if the parents know how to give you that information, then they don't have to overly, bash the kid. I tell parents all the time, look, I'm not the trouble place. You don't bring your kid here so that I will tongue lash them or that I will straighten them up, because if that worked, you wouldn't have to bring your kid here, right? So I don't have any magic pill. I don't have any magic that if I say this, your kid's going to magically do better. It's about us building a relationship together, us as a team, me, mom, dad, kid, equine professional. It's going to take all of us to help this get better. And usually when parents understand that, and they understand where they give the feedback, then it goes a little smoother, no matter what kind of program you're running. Does that make sense?
I love that. And I think the more structured, you know, we talk about being structured and flexible, of course, but the more clarity you can provide of what your service is and how we communicate and the approach we take,
Right.
the more you will feel in control, and you will give that, you know, kind of gift to the parents and the kids of, okay, this is how this runs, this feels safe to me, this is structured. But with your like trying to find 3 things or 1 thing or whatever that you like about someone, do you find that because people know that, because people can feel that you don't like them, if you've identified something, would it be appropriate to go as far as to verbalize that? Like, if you're like, okay, I love when this kid smiles, that's what I'm going to say. So like, to tell that kid next time that they jump out of the car with a smile, dude, I love that smile, I love seeing that smile when you come here. Just try to start like shifting that energy of, I'm normally nervous about my sessions with you.
I think our bodies tell the kid,
Okay.
right? I think when that kid jumps out and that kid smiles or is beaming, you know, and you feel that in your body, the kid knows, you know, that you're excited to see them. You know, your words can match that, but if your words say one thing and your body doesn't say the same thing, then they're gonna not trust your words, right? So it's much more important that you feel it in your body and you let your body speak more than your words speaking, if that makes sense.
It totally does. So I think it's a good exercise for any program director that has mentors. If they notice their mentor's just having a hard time with a particular kid or personality types or power struggles or whatever they're going through, if the first question the program director can ask is, what are you loving about sessions, or what do you love about this kid? And then I would obviously do that exercise with program directors for parents, so that we can shift how we're looking. There's so many times that I just going through the adoption history or the foster care history with a parent, I noticed this huge shift. Like, they remember the beginning. They remember when that kid came to them and how much progress they've made. But being in the thick of it today, right now, is difficult. So sometimes, you know, it's our job to kind of hold the 30,000 foot view of that framework. I really like that.
And I also think it's super important when you're hearing all the progress this kid's made, that you can verbalize it back to the parent, to that foster parent or adopted parent, whoever it is, right? Because they forget. I can't tell you how many times a parent will bring a kid in for services. We've seen them for a while. They've made a ton of progress, and the parent says, he's not getting any better. Things are just the same. And I take out my intake paperwork and I look at it and I read it out loud. And the parent says, who's that? I said, that's what you said about your kid. And they're like, you're kidding. I said that? Like, yeah, don't you remember? And then they start thinking back and they're like, oh my gosh, we have come so far. Right. And I think it's important to be able to show that we have come far, or that a kid is brave, you know, or a kid is strong, or a kid is able to tell the truth even when it's cost them everything. Right. These are things that sometimes we don't notice, right? And these are huge things that we can grasp about who is this kid, you know, how has this kid survived whatever it is that they've survived? How have they done that? Because that's an amazing thing to know and to connect with. And a kid who is strong and courageous is going to probably be very controlling and hard-headed, because they had to be in order to survive, right? And so when a kid is starting to try to control everything, you know, one of the things I try to do is breathe into that and say, that's a skill. That's a really good skill to have. So how do I help this kid feel some control over what's happening right now so that they can relax? Because what the kid's telling me is, I don't feel safe. You know, if I'm having to control everything that's happening here, I'm telling you in every way I know how, I don't feel safe. And so then that's my job to figure out, well, what can we do to help this kid feel safe?
Mm.
Right. And it's usually something you have to kind of be a detective with, because the kid isn't going to be able to tell you in their words, right? They're not going to say, well, if you would do this, this, and this, I'd feel safer. Most of the time, they can't identify it. And if you ask them, they would say, that's not true. I don't feel safe. I feel fine. Right? Because it would be vulnerable to tell you that I felt unsafe. And that might make me more unsafe in their world where they came from. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I think that, we can't stress enough just telling kids what they can expect, adding to their safety, in our program, we allow kids to engage in a 3-part plan. They develop their plan so that we can refer back to it's their plan, giving them some opportunity to have some choice in what they're doing. But yeah, I mean, understanding when we have, it's pretty normal for us, especially in a like adult child relationship, for us to kind of impose what we're telling somebody to do, impose directives and kind of take that choice away. So I really love reading that behavior as I don't feel safe. And regardless of what that behavior is, if that's what you read it as, if a kid were to come up to you and say, I don't feel safe, you'd be like, oh my gosh, I'm sorry. How can I help you?
Yeah.
So that, whether it looks like cussing or acting out or, kicking dirt or whatever they're doing,
Yeah.
if we can respond to that as I don't feel safe, then it allows us to not react, but respond in that empathetic space that's going to be helpful for our sessions.
Right. That's right. Because if you brace against it, which is common for us to do, right?
Right.
When we get in these power struggles with kids, our bodies brace against it. Then we're just proving to the kid that there was something that they needed to protect themselves about this relationship, right? That I was going to be domineering, that I was going to take away their choices, that I was going to somehow be controlling of them. Then when we do that, we get in that power struggle, we're just reaffirming that for them. So it's just going to increase. The power struggle is just going to increase. But when you look at it differently and your body softens, then usually kids are like, their little faces get a little confused, They're like, what just happened, right? They're not going to ask you that, but they're going to be like, what's going on, I had a kid recently, I was thinking about him because he has a horrific trauma history, and he came to session and he was here maybe 2 minutes. We were having a great conversation. He was lively, he was bright. And in about 2 minutes, he just tanked. He just started shutting down. His little shoulders started slumping, and he stopped responding. And my brain is just like, what happened, And the only thing I could think was something happened that I'm not aware of. Maybe I said something. Maybe I did something, that I was responsible for this. So I just said, hey, let's go to the pond. And I just started walking, and he just followed, and we didn't speak at all. We got to the pond, and I just started throwing rocks in the pond. And I think we threw rocks for 15 minutes. He eventually was throwing with me. We were throwing. He started talking to me a little bit. And once he started talking, I said, hey, what happened? And he said, I just started feeling really sad. And I don't know why. It just happens like that sometimes. And I just don't know what to do. So, but if I had tried to come at it full head, he would have just shut down more. So it did something that was regulating and rhythmic, and it was repetitive, right? Throwing rocks. And basically I started picking up rocks and just handed it to him. So he had one after another to throw, right? So that he started getting rhythmic pattern and repetitive input in his body, and he regulated. And he was doing it with me. And then, I didn't even have to prompt him or ask him. He just started telling me about it. And I think we can never underestimate the power of doing things like that together, right? Things that help to speak to the survival part of our brain. If he was a baby, we would have just picked the little rascal up and petted him and rocked, and we would have thought nothing of it. But because he's like 9, we're like, I have no idea what to do. But in reality, it's the same thing. We just can't pick them up and hold them, right? But we can do rhythmic, pattern, and repetitive things, which are the same thing as holding that baby and rocking and petting them, right? But we have to do them out here together. But it's the same input, basically, if that makes sense.
It so does. Can you give, so if there are mentors or program directors that, or parents that are like, yes, my kid gets dysregulated or shuts down or whatever, and I know that I need that, I know that I need that outlet, but you know, the way you did it was so beautiful, where you just said, hey, let's go to the pond, and you made it, you didn't make it this like, let's engage in a regulating activity or whatever. So can you give some like just really common, typical regulating activities that somebody can just kind of shift gears and go into?
Mm-hmm. For people at home, rocking chairs or gliders are great interventions. For the barn, a barrel, having kids sit on a barrel and just rock from foot to foot is really a great way of being able to, that's actually, if we're going to sit at a round pen, I have a barrel for the kid. And usually I sit on one too. So that way we're doing the same thing. And the kid will just naturally go foot to foot, foot to foot. And then that helps them to regulate if they weren't already regulated. Bubbles are great ways of getting kids engaged and teaching them how to calm their bodies down, trying to get them to blow the largest bubble they can, right? Or if they're little kids, the same size bubbles, as many bubbles as they can, but they're all the same size, right? So they're learning how to control their breath, but they don't really know they're learning how to control their breath. They're just doing bubbles, right? So that's really great. Playing catch, kicking a ball back and forth are great ways of doing that. Kids who like to cook, using a rolling pin is another really great thing. Kneading dough, mixing, you know, these are all things that we do in our lives that we don't even realize are rhythmic, right? Even sweeping is very rhythmic. You'll have kids who love to sweep, and you're like, why do you love to sweep? But sometimes it's just the rhythm of it, and that it accomplishes something, right? And so you just have to sort of be creative. There's 1,000 things in people's homes. We use drums a lot because drums have been used in, societies for eons. And so we started using drums to help kids express things that they can't say, for us to be able to connect. And when we work with families, we do a lot of drumming, and it's amazing how connected they leave feeling.
Wow.
And we might not have said any words. We might not have said anything. We might have only used the drums to express whatever it is that we needed to express. And yet it feels like this weight has been lifted off of you. Yeah, so I think drumming is great. People don't have drums. We live in a drum, you know. Body percussion is a really great thing for teach kids. All the different sounds your body can make, you know. So you can clap your hands in like 5 different ways to make different sounds. Teaching kids that and helping them do that rhythmically is really cool. Hand games we used to play when we were kids, you know, the ones where you double clap, and very rhythmic. Kids love it. I can't do them very well, but parents usually are pretty good at it. And it gives them something to do together that's rhythmic and patterned and repetitive, and it feels good to them because they're also connecting, right? So I think, be creative. That's the best thing I can tell you, because there's a ton of things out there. You know, some parents like to dance and use music, and that's great too. You know, use whatever the kid really enjoys.
I love that. And especially with the hand clapping things that kids do, it's a good opportunity for them to teach you. If they know one and you don't, then they can be the one that teaches you, which is helpful too. I absolutely love that so much, because when I was building this program, I just felt like there was such a gap between, there wasn't like a learning component or a place for community mentors to really be in, because I felt like it was therapy or nothing. And as I was hanging out with kids as a case manager, I was like, we are not doing anything special. like, yeah, having a social work degree might help, but a lot of times we're like swinging on swings. We are pouring into somebody, investing time. Like, I'm learning about them. I'm showing them like, wow, dude, you've come so far, and building them up and validating their feelings. I'm like, this doesn't take a lot of people can be this person to someone,
Yes.
you
Yes.
know? So I love that it's not this like crazy curriculum you need to read and implement with a kid to get these desired results. It's like, you can play in a rice bin. You can, you can kick a ball. You can
Yeah.
do drums, and it can actually be just doing drums. You don't need to make it
Right.
all clinical and therapeutic.
No. Right.
I mean, it is therapeutic,
Yes.
but
It's healing in and of itself.
yes.
You don't have to do anything else, right? But I think you're speaking very much the power of presence. When
Mm,
you are present, really, in a person's life, you're really there. You're really fully present. You're not doing a grocery list in your head as you're sitting there with them, right? That changes us, right? It changes us as we connect, as our biologies connect, our nervous systems connect. We change in those moments of being truly present with each other. And that's what I would hope any mentor really can learn and understand. It is being fully there in your body, emotionally and physically, 100% in that moment, giving to this person and this time in this relationship that will change you and this kid.
it's so good. This has been so rich. I want to really, really thank you for your time and all of your experience and sharing this wisdom with us. Is there a way for us to follow or support the work that you're doing?
Yeah, sure. You can follow us on our Facebook page. It's Pecan Creek Ranch, and it's in Georgetown, Texas. We post a lot of different videos and blogs and things that we try to speak to the human experience or what's going on with horses. It's all relational, because that's the work we do. Work with relationship with self and others in our higher power. Um, so most people, that's where they follow us. We also have a website and a LinkedIn page, but most of it right now is on our Facebook page. But we'd be glad to have people contact us and talk to us about anything that they need further support on.
I love that. Well, thank you for being a resource. I know that we can't get enough good resources, and I will make sure to link to all of your stuff, but go on to the show notes if you're listening, and make sure you like them on Facebook so that you can follow them and see all of their practical, awesome advice. And this has just been so good. Thank you so much for your time.
I've
And
enjoyed it very much.
and doing this work, you're such an asset to this field, really.
I appreciate it. Thank you for doing this podcast. It was really a lot of fun. And I think it's very helpful for people. So it's a great gift.
Thank you.